All right, welcome back. And my goal in this video is to make the best tutorial on appointment booking using RetellAI.com, N8N, and GoHighLevel. I've watched quite a few of appointment booking tutorials, and I find that some of them are overcomplicated for me. Although that's subjective, everybody learns a different way. So I wanted to do my best to create a video that will reduce the amount of workflows needed to accomplish this simple task. And then I also wanted to reduce the reliance on AI within the workflow. And what do I mean by that? I mean that I don't want to use an AI agent. As we've seen, those results have been unpredictable over time because it relies heavily on prompting and the LLM itself, which we don't control, and AI can come with cost. So we are going to use AI in this workflow, but we're just going to keep it to a minimum. And really the task that we do inside of this workflow using AI can technically be done not using AI, or maybe done on the Retell side, which is always going to be using AI. That is the voice AI component. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Justin Melendez, and I like to create content about problems that I solve in my business and share them with you. If you are new here, welcome. Please comment and subscribe. It helps me. And everything I cover in this video is going to be provided to you for free, whether that's the N8N template, the voice AI template, if I can export that, which in Retell I can. It's really nice. I'll provide that for you in my free school community automation station. So if you're new here and you're not in the school community, go ahead and join. It's 100% free. All the resources for this video will be provided in a downloadable format for you there, so you can follow along, and I encourage you to do. Now, forewarning, this is technical content. It's extremely dry. It's very detail oriented. So I recommend that you watch this, whether it's in portions or all at once. I recommend you watch it undistracted. Maybe you watch it once all the way through and at 2x speed, and then you come back and then you try to rewatch it and practically implement everything that you're learning. I hope that this is useful for you. I'll tell you that I've made content a lot on Vapi, the voice API, which is another voice AI provider. If you don't know what voice AI is, it's essentially the ability to have an AI-powered agent that answers phone calls for you and can do very complex and helpful tasks. A lot of companies are now deciding to replace sort of their front-end receptionist with AI. So it's able to collect information, book calls, in some cases accept payments, or do certain tasks inside of your business. So it's very powerful. If you've watched any of my prior content, I've talked a lot about Vapi, the voice API, Vapi.ai, I think that's the name of it. Recently, they've released an update, and that update, in my opinion, has degraded service. So call quality went down the hill, and then the ability to create custom tools or custom functions also went downhill. And it's not terrible. It's probably all fixable, but it forced me to listen to my community who's been talking about RetellAI for a while. And it forced me to go down the rabbit hole and try to figure out solutions there. And I've been thoroughly impressed with what RetellAI has to offer. And so I'm not affiliated in any way with AI. I mean, with RetellAI, I guess I am affiliated. I have an affiliate link, but they haven't sponsored this video or anything. But I will say that my experience has been positive thus far. I find the call quality to be a lot better. I find the interface to be a lot more simple to navigate, and these AI agents to be more simple to deploy, right? We're going to go in, and what I want to do is start from scratch, okay? And if you see this little workflow here, essentially what I want to do is we're going to create a single workflow, a reactive workflow, as you see, or linear. You see here, it's not an AI agent. This is a linear workflow where we are defining specific paths and specific conditions to take certain actions, whether it's in RetellAI or in GoHighLevel. And essentially the ultimate goal is we want to be able to book an appointment. We want somebody to be able to call and say, hey, I want to set an appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. And then we should be able to have automation take over from there and actually book the appointment inside of our GoHighLevel calendar. And so it's going to start with an inbound voice AI call. We're going to create a contact. We're going to book an appointment. And if successful, we'll tell the AI agent to tell the caller. And if it's not successful, we're going to go and say, hey, what are some other open slots? Because most of the time when it's not successful, it's because the slot isn't available inside of our calendar. So we want it to suggest a few open slots and then try to book the appointment there. So without further ado, let's hop right in. So I'm here inside of our RetellAI account, and I'm just going to create a new agent. If you don't have a RetellAI account, I'll leave a link down below. You can create a free account, but you will need to add a payment method here. What's nice about RetellAI is their pricing is sort of pay as you go. I think they give you $10 in credits to begin with, just so that you can test the system out, but you won't be able to actually receive inbound calls unless you add a payment method. And so if you add a payment method, you'll be paying for usage. And as you see here, I have a remaining balance of $6.03, and I haven't recharged it yet. So I was able to buy my phone number and do the testing that I did prior to this video with just that initial $10. So you will have to add a payment method, but I don't think it's going to cost you too much unless you start implementing this. And when you do, you're either saving money because you're building this for your business, or you're making money because you're building it for another business. So once you're in and you're logged in, you added your payment method, you're going to come over here to agents. You see I have a few agents here, but we're going to start from scratch. And what I want to do is create a new agent, and I am going to create a single prompt agent. And if I go ahead and click that, we'll start from blank. And I'm actually going to reference another agent that I already created, because I'm not going to focus too heavily on prompting the AI agent here. We're just going to have a very simple example prompt so that we can move on with the N8N workflow. That's probably the most complex, what most of you guys came here for. So let me come in here. We're going to name the agent YouTube appointment booking agent. We will leave the model and the voice exactly as it appears here. I'm not too worried about that right now. And then I'm just going to copy a very simple prompt that I have here in my example. And all we're telling this AI agent is, hey, you're an appointment setter. Your goal is to book an appointment. The information that you need is the person's name and the requested appointment time. And then I just set a few rules. If there's no available slots, then just suggest 2 open slots. So in the workflow, we're actually going to send it back like a ton of open slots. And we want the AI in Retell to just pick 2 that are closest to the time that they originally requested and suggest it to them. And then this one is just a quality of life thing. We just want to acknowledge the lead's request and inform them that we're booking their appointment. What I noticed is that whenever we were booking the appointment without this line, it was actually booking the appointment in the background, but it didn't tell the client or the caller that it's doing some work in the background. And so it just went silent for about a second or 2 and then said, hey, your appointment's booked. So just a quality of life thing. The next thing we're going to do here is in the welcome message, I'm going to select AI initiates, and it begins with a defined message. And then I'll leave this, its default message is, hey, how can I help you today? I think that's fine for our testing. And yeah, so let's go ahead and save that. Now, 2 things we're going to do. First thing we need to do is we're going to hop into N8N, okay? So inside of N8N, if you're unfamiliar with N8N, N8N is sort of a replacement for Make.com, if you're familiar with Make.com. If you're not familiar with any of them, N8N, Make.com, these no-code platforms are essentially the glue that will tie together 2 different applications. And for example, in this situation, we're using RetellAI and we're using GoHighLevel, and we need the glue in between. We need something in between that can speak both languages, and that's N8N in this case. And so RetellAI is going to send information to N8N, and then N8N is going to transform that information and go talk to GoHighLevel, all using webhooks and APIs. And if you don't know what that means, it's okay. Essentially, it's the way that programs talk to each other. Us humans talk to each other this way in natural language, but programs talk to each other in 1s and 0s and very structured and formatted formats. And so N8N is the glue. If you're unfamiliar, welcome. You're about to get familiar. And if you're unfamiliar, we're probably going to blow your socks off. So once you're in N8N, we're going to go ahead and create a new workflow. First thing I like to do is name the workflow. So we'll say YouTube test appointment booker. Probably could be better on the name there, but it's okay. The first step we're going to add here is a trigger, and a trigger is going to be Webhook. So let's search for Webhook. And this is the trigger. So what is a trigger? It's exactly what it sounds like. This action, a webhook, is going to trigger follow-on actions. And so this trigger here, we're going to configure to be post for the method, because that's the type of message that RetellAI is going to send over to N8N. It's a post method. And then all we're going to do here is instead of clicking selecting respond immediately, everything else can stay default, but instead of sending respond immediately, we're going to respond using a webhook, a respond webhook node. Very important here. And so once we do that, I'm going to click out of here for a second, and then I'm going to add an action, and that action is going to be, I'm going to search for webhook again, and you'll see this node that's labeled respond to webhook. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And under respond with, we're going to select JSON. And then I'm going to come over here and just change this my field to result. We're going to come back and change this, and then that can stay as value. That's fine right now. All right, so now we have our trigger, and then we have our respond to webhook. Okay, we need this because we just told the trigger, hey, what are we going to respond with? We're going to respond with the respond to webhook node. Okay, don't get too confused. This is all going to make sense, and this is all going to change here in the next few minutes as we go through configuring it. So first thing I want to do is copy this webhook URL. This is essentially like your mailing address for N8N. So if you think about you going to the post office and you want to send something to your parents for Christmas, they have a mailing address. And so you give the post office that mailing address and they route that message directly to your parents. In this case, your parents' house is N8N, and this post right here, this test URL, is actually the address. So we're going to tell RetellAI, hey, if you want to communicate with our glue, N8N, then this is where you need to send the information to. And that's maybe a bad explanation, but hopefully for some of you it makes sense. So next thing we need to do is add a function. And so a function is essentially a custom action that you want the voice AI agent, a custom capability that you want the voice AI agent to have. And in this case, we want it to be able to book appointments on our GoHighLevel calendar. And so if we add a function here, you notice there's some standard functions here. It's got a native integration for cow.com that's unique to Retell, which is pretty awesome. But we're not dealing with cow.com here. We're dealing with GoHighLevel. And so we need a custom function. And that custom function is going to be named appointment booking. Yeah, we'll just leave that at appointment booking right now. And I'm going to reference here again my example because I don't want to sit here and reinvent the wheel. This is an important step, but it is not the most important step. So for the description here, what we're going to say is just put a brief description in here, appointment booking tool. That description is actually being used by the voice AI. So I wouldn't leave it blank, because if you leave it blank, then probably inside of the main prompt, you would have to say when to use the appointment booking tool. But if you noticed in the main prompt, I didn't even mention the appointment booking tool or the appointment booking function, because I find that the description is clear enough to tell the AI agent, hey, here's a tool you have, and this is what it's used for. And so let me go back here and make sure I copy this test URL. Now, once we turn the workflow on later on, we're going to use the production URL, but right now we're doing some testing. So let's go ahead and paste that test URL in there. And then this might trip a lot of you up, okay? So parameters. What this is essentially, I mentioned computers needing to talk a specific language. And so we need what's called structured data. We need the voice AI agent to put things in a specific format. And we ask the lead for name and requested appointment time. How do we make sure that information is passed to N8N the same way every single time? You do that through configuring these parameters, okay? And these parameters are put in here in what's called JSON format, okay? So if you look at these examples, you can just click example and you'll see an example here of the schema. Big word, don't worry about it. Essentially, you're telling the function, hey, this is the information I need, and this is how we're going to send it to them, and this is like the name of the variables. And so I'm going to show you a very easy way to do this, and most of you are familiar with ChatGPT. I hope so, and if you're not, then you're going to be familiar today. Excuse me. The simplest way to do this, you don't need to be a developer, you don't need to be an expert, is take one of these examples, and we are going to cut, okay, or copy, whatever you want to do, and we're going to paste it in here. And then above it, all we're going to do is we're going to tell it exactly what we want. We'll say, let's see, I'm just clicking Shift Enter, and I'm going to say, use the example below. I need the following properties. You notice properties right here. You have the following properties that are, this one says appointment available TS or whatever. This is just an example. I need the following properties, and I'm just going to say name and requested appointment. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of a description of what those things are, because ChatGPT has no clue what I'm talking about here or what the context is. So I'm going to say the name is the name of the caller, and the requested appointment is the requested appointment time in natural language. Example, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Okay, let's see what ChatGPT comes up with. So here's an updated JSON schema with the required properties of the caller's name and the requested appointment time. So pretty cool. So if we look here, we have, it looks pretty much the same. We have properties, name, and then it came up with a description, the name of the caller. Type string, that just means that it's a series of letters and numbers and maybe special characters, but really a name is just going to be letters. That's fine. It's a sentence. And then requested appointment is also a string, and the requested appointment is natural language time example, tomorrow at 2 p.m. There's actually in JSON schema, there is a value you can set here for examples, but that's fine. And then it says required name and requested appointment. I'm going to modify this a little bit, and I'm going to get rid of name, because really all we need is if somebody calls, we have their phone number, and if they request an appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m., that's really all we care about. And so what I'm going to just do here is copy and then come back into RetellAI, and then we're going to paste that schema here. And then I am just going to remove name, and all we have here is requested appointment. Now down here, you can click format JSON just to make sure that the JSON is formatted correctly. And you see it made a minor fix there. And then we're just going to click save. So at this point, we have a tool that will take information that's happening inside the call, and then it is going to reach out to that address that we provided it and say, hey, go book this appointment. Okay. So we're not done yet though. One thing I want to do is, in order to book an appointment programmatically using GoHighLevel's API, again, if you don't know what an API is, it's a programming interface where programs talk to each other. It's how programs talk to each other, how two different programs talk to one another. And so if we come in here, if you Google GoHighLevel API documentation and go to the GoHighLevel 2.0 documentation, you will see where we're at here. We are referencing the create appointment endpoint. Don't get confused. An endpoint is just essentially this unique URL that does a unique action inside of an API. So for this one, this endpoint is create appointment. If we were referencing update appointment, that endpoint would be different. So if you look at the URL here, you have a different endpoint. Okay. So here we're creating an appointment. And if we just reference this documentation for a second and look at required fields, it looks like we're going to need the contact ID for the contact inside of GoHighLevel. Now, how do we get that contact ID? We either need to search for the contact or we need to create the contact. And so that introduces a little bit of complexity to this workflow, because we need that ID in order to book an appointment. Just having the person's phone number isn't necessarily enough to create an appointment, because if you notice here, nowhere does it ask for the phone number of the person. Okay, it asks for a contact ID. So we are going to solve for that. And what we're going to do here is we're not going to listen for events yet. I'm going to copy this parameter here. I'm sorry, this URL here. And I'm going to come down to webhook settings, and then inbound call webhook URL, I'm just going to paste that same webhook URL. And the reason, this can be a different workflow, but the reason I'm pasting the same webhook URL is because I want to keep it all in one workflow just to simplify things. And especially I think for the demo, it makes a little bit of sense, and it gives us some opportunity to practice with some of the conditional statements inside of N8N. But when I try to paste it in here, it's going to tell me to go somewhere else. So once I come out of here, it says, hey, we've moved this to a phone level webhook. And if you don't know what an inbound webhook is, it's confusing. Okay. So I'm going to explain it for you right now. When somebody calls your phone number inside of RetellAI, which is the appointment booking agent, we're going to assign it to the appointment booking agent. Essentially, you call a number, this agent picks up. Now, this webhook that we're going to paste in here essentially is, as soon as a call comes in, this webhook's going to get fired off and it's going to send it to our N8N. And what's nice about it is it gives us an opportunity to do something, to provide more information or context to the voice AI agent. You're going to see exactly what I mean here. And in this case, we're going to use it to get the contact ID. So essentially, as soon as the phone rings, this webhook is going to get called, which means our N8N workflow is going to get activated. And then in here, we're going to take some actions. We're going to try to create the contact with the phone number the person called from. And if that contact already exists, then we're going to search for the contact ID and provide it back to Retell and say, hey, here's the contact ID. Just keep it in your knowledge base for later, because you're going to need it whenever it's time to book an appointment. All right. If the contact doesn't exist, we're actually going to create the contact, and then we're just going to return the contact ID to RetellAI and say, hey, store this in your little memory and send it to me later, because you're going to need it. And so what we're going to do here is follow this prompt where it says, hey, this stuff has changed. So we're going to click here, and we're in the phone number settings, and this is a test phone number that I have here. And if you notice, we have an inbound call agent, nothing is assigned. And so I'm actually going to select the YouTube booking agent that we just created. And then right here, add an inbound webhook. And we're just going to paste our webhook that I copied, our address that I copied. And that should automatically save. And then we can come back into our agents. Now, I'm going to show you exactly how this works. I'm going to actually call that phone number, and then we're going to test this workflow, and you'll see that we'll receive a message as soon as we receive a call. So let me just come in here, and I have a demo account open on my end. So let me call this phone number, 7066613. we need to make sure our webhook is listening, okay? So let's click listen for events, and it looks like we're listening, waiting for events. Once I make this call, we should receive a webhook, okay? And we're just gonna work with that for now. So let's go ahead and call. Okay, I'm not gonna say anything, okay? I just wanted you to see, as soon as the phone started ringing, Retell sent us a message to that address, and now we have the inbound call webhook. No words were spoken by the AI agent or the lead, but we got a message, okay? Very important. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to pin this message here in N8N because we're gonna work with this message here for a little bit, okay? So what I wanna do is I'm gonna stretch this out a little bit, okay? We're gonna use this here in a second. And what I wanna do is I wanna create a sort of a flow for things. So we're gonna get two types of webhooks that come to this address. That is the initial call webhook that we just received right now. And then the next one we're going to receive is the function call. Whenever somebody asks to book an appointment, they're going to send another message that's going to be different to here. So what I want to do is I want to be able to switch. So I'm going to look for the switch node and I want to route traffic accordingly. And so if I come in here and I look at the information that got passed, let's see if I can make this a better, let's collapse headers. And if you look at the event here, you see it's got a specific value, and I'm going to copy this value here, and I'm going to drag and drop the routing rules, and I'm going to select this, and I'm going to say, hey, if json.body.event, again, I got that just by dragging and dropping, is equal to, and I'm going to paste call inbound, then go to, and I'm just going to name this path inbound call, and yeah, we can leave that switch, and then we're going to test this step. Okay, so if you noticed here, we've got only one route, okay? So what switch does is it creates different routes based on different criteria, but later on, we're going to have more than one route. But right now, we just want to make sure that this checks out. So if a webhook comes in, remember, we pin this data, so we're just using the same data, so we don't have to continue to call the number over and over again. If it comes in and the JSON body event is equal to call inbound, then go down this path. And so we only have one path, and that's the path right now. Perfect. We're still connected to this webhook event right here. That's okay. We're going to leave it connected. We're just going to add nodes in between. Now, the next thing we want to do is we're going to try to create a contact inside of GoHighLevel. There's multiple ways you can do this. Anytime you're configuring automation workflows, there's no one way to solve the problem. The way I choose to solve this problem is try to create a contact. If it fails, it's going to give me the contact ID of the existing contact. If it succeeds, then it's also going to give me the contact ID of the existing contact. Some people may choose to search for the contact first by their phone number or their name or whatever, and then try to create the contact. I'm just going to try to create the contact. So if I come into the GoHighLevel documentation and we come down here to contacts, I am going to search for create contacts. So this is an endpoint, create contacts, and here we are. So what I'm going to do here is let's go ahead and select HTTP request, because HTTP request is how we make API calls. It's how we talk to another program, okay? If we come back into our create contact, you notice in this blue box, the method is post. And so if we come in here, we're going to switch this get to a post, and then we're going to copy this endpoint URL, and we are going to paste it in the URL here. Now, authentication. This is an important part, okay? Inside of GoHighLevel, we need to be able to authenticate, because if we don't authenticate, then that means anybody would be able to make changes into your CRM. So this is a very important security feature. And so if you don't already have a private integration created inside of GoHighLevel, I'm going to show you a very easy way to do that. So let's come into GoHighLevel. This is our demo account here, and then we're going to click settings, and then down here, we're going to click on private integrations. And you notice here, I have a few private integrations already created, but we're going to create a new one just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to create a new integration. We're going to name this Retell appointment booking, and then I'll leave the description blank for now. And now scopes, this is the permission that you want. We're essentially going to create a password for this program, for our N8N workflow. And we just want to tell it, hey, what do we want to give access to? What access do we want to give to this workflow? A few things that we need to do, right? We're going to be working with contacts. So let's go ahead and search for contacts. So we need to be able to view, and we need to be able to edit contacts, because we're going to search contacts and we're also going to create contacts. Really, we're just creating contacts. So these two are important. And then the next thing we're going to do is we need to make sure that we give it the appropriate permissions to mess with our calendars, okay? So let's search for calendar. And so we need to be able to view calendars. We need to be able to edit calendars. We need to be able to view calendar events. We need to be able to edit calendar events. Groups, we don't really need it. You can always change these scopes afterwards, but we'll go ahead and add everything under the sun for calendars right now, okay? I'd recommend that you tighten this up a little bit, but just for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to create it, okay? So let's click on create. Very important here. One, you never want to share this like I am right now, okay? This is very dangerous because somebody will have access to your CRM if they grab a hold of this key. Two, as soon as you click the X button here, this key is going to disappear. So we need to make sure that we copy it down right now and that we actually use it, and then we can close it because we'll never be able to see it again. If you close it and you didn't copy it, not the end of the world, you can just create another key, but it's just time consuming. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'll delete this when I'm done with this tutorial. And under authentication, we're going to select generic credential type and then header authentication. And then what I want to do is create a new credential, assuming you don't already have a credential created. Inside of the name, I'm going to type in authorization. And as a matter of fact, before I type this in, I want to show you something. Inside of the documentation, we have specific headers required. And this is one of the headers, which is authorization. And so we're going to create that by defining a predefined header authentication. So I'm just going to copy this. And the reason I'm copying it and pasting it is because this is case sensitive and it's also like space sensitive. So there needs to be no spaces before or after, and the A needs to be capitalized. So I am just copying that and I'm going to paste it in here. And then down here, what I'm going to do is switch to expression mode. And then I want to type in, if you come over here in our example, it provides us an example of what it looks like. Now, this is an example key. We just created a private integration key. So we're actually going to replace this, but I'm just going to copy this whole thing for now. So we have the exact formatting we need, and I'm going to paste it in here. If you notice, the B is capitalized. That's important. The spelling of bearer is important. And the fact that there's a space between bearer and the example key is important. And so I'm going to delete this example key because we don't need it. We actually have a key. And we're going to copy that, and we are just going to paste that key, make sure there's no spaces after it, but make sure there is a space before it. This key is case sensitive. So if you try to type it out and you capitalize that P, it will break it. Last thing I want to do is I'm going to name this credential, and I'm going to name it YouTube Retell AI Test and save that. We're going to reuse this over and over again. We're not going to have to recreate this credential. So it's good that we created it now. All right, so next thing we're going to do is I'm actually going to name this up here. I like to name these create contact just so that it is pretty descriptive. And what do we need to create a contact? So it looks like at a minimum, we need a location ID. Okay, I'll show you where to get that inside of your GoHighLevel account. And then you can create a contact using any of this information here. We are going to keep it simple, and we're going to create a contact with a phone number because that's the information that we have just by the person calling our RetellAI line. We do have their phone number, okay? And so what I'm going to do here is I am going to send headers. There's one more header that we need to send. If you come back up here, remember there was this version header. We're going to copy this. And we're going to paste version in the name. And then it actually gives us the answer to the test here. And that's the date that we need to reference. And all this is case sensitive. So just copy and paste whenever you can. In the body, what we're going to do here is we're going to send the body. And we are going to send location ID because we need that. So body parameter 1 is location ID. And the value of that, if we come inside of here, close out of this private integration, and we click on our business profile, there's a location ID up here. We'll just copy that, and then we will paste it inside of there for the value. And the next thing we need is phone number, right? So phone number is all lowercase phone, so we're going to copy that. We're going to add a parameter, phone. And then in here, we need to fill in this value just depending on what phone number called us. And so we got some information whenever somebody called. And if you come over here to the left-hand side, if you just pop this and change this over to expression and then pop this open, you'll see that we have all the information from previous nodes that have executed. And so our trigger actually had some information that we needed. And so I'm going to minimize some of this stuff so that it's pretty simple to see. So if you notice here, we've got this from number. So that's the number we called from. And that's the number your leads will be calling from. So we're just literally dragging and dropping that in here. And you notice that the phone number is now filled in. And so you can sort of see the example here. And if we test this, then we should get a contact created inside of our GoHighLevel account. So let's test it. Awesome. So it looks like it was created because we received a contact ID. And if we come back into our GoHighLevel sub account and we go to contacts, that we now have a contact created. That's awesome. Our N8N workflow just created that contact with information that it received from the voice call. Pretty cool. So what I want to do now is, because it gave me the contact ID, we need to return that contact ID to Retell somehow, some way. Okay, so we're going to figure out how to do that together. So what I want to do here is, we created the contact that was successful, and we're going to set the variable somewhere, and we come in here to set fields, and we'll say set contact ID. We're going to rename that. And then what I want to do is, I want to add a field, and the name is going to be contact ID. And we're just going to drag and drop this value in there so that the contact ID is set. We're going to test this step, make sure it's successful. And there you go. Okay. So very simply put, we've so far received a call. We actually tried to create a contact inside of our GoHighLevel. We were successful. We were able to create the contact. We set the contact ID. Now we need to send that contact ID back to Retell so that it stores it in its handy dandy little knowledge base, or just its little brain. So how do we do that? Now, if I click here under phone numbers, and right where we set the inbound webhook, if you click learn more, you'll find the way that it wants you to respond. So if you come here to responses, you notice that there's this section here called dynamic variables. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here is, I'm just going to copy this right here. But we want to set essentially a dynamic variable that's named contact ID, and we're going to send it back to Retell and say, hey, here's the contact ID, just store it and give it to me later. And so I'm just copying this from the documentation. Again, if you missed how I got there, I'm in phone numbers, and then under inbound webhook, I clicked learn more, and here it is. So under responses, I'm going to copy this, and then under the respond to webhook, I want to respond in a very specific format. So let's go ahead and click expression here. We're going to pop this open, and I'm just going to delete all this. And then I'm going to paste what I just copied. And we have some information that we actually don't need, okay? And so I'm going to remove this. So call inbound, we need to keep this part, but we're going to remove this agent ID because we don't want to override the agent ID. We do want a dynamic variable, but we don't really care about metadata. And so very important here, we're going to remove these metadata and whatever's in between the squiggly brackets. And then we need to remove this comma because there's nothing that comes after it. This is very nuanced and detailed formatting, but all this is going to be provided to you inside the school community. So you can just import this. You're not going to have to redo this. But if you're ever questioning it, you can go into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you validate this format? And it will tell you, okay? Now, customer name. Maybe we want to send the customer name, but in this example, we don't want to send the customer name. In this example, we want to send the contact ID. And so if we come here, we're going to name it contact ID. And instead of John Doe here, what I'm going to do is just drag and drop this contact ID. So you notice that contact ID is filled. And so what's going to happen is, as soon as I call the number, we're going to create the contact, and then we're going to send it back to Retell, and we're going to have a contact ID. Now, we're going to test this here in a second. And I'm going to delete this contact because if I test it right now, it's actually going to fail because we haven't accounted for failures here. And so I'm going to show you what success looks like first so that we can have a small win, and then we'll see what failure looks like. Let's go ahead and make sure that this contact is deleted, and it is. And I'm going to save this workflow, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to unpin this data, okay? And I'm going to click this little trash can so everything's removed, and then I'm going to click test workflow. So right now, our workflow is waiting for a call, and so I'm going to come into our test account that you can't see here, but I'm going to make a call. And we should receive a webhook, and it should go all the way through here, create the contact, and then respond with the contact ID. And I'm going to show you where we can look inside of Retell to actually determine if it did what we thought it did. So let's go ahead and click call. Okay. So the phone rang and this webhook immediately got triggered. Okay, cool. So if we come in here, it looks like everything actually sent. So the contact was created. If we come inside of our conversations here or our contacts, you'll see that the contact was created. Now let's see if it actually sent the information and stored it correctly inside of Retell. So if I come in here to call history and then click on this call, you'll see that the data We don't have dynamic variables in here. That's interesting. Let's see what happened. Why this information didn't make it back correctly. So let's see. Is this the correct phone call? Call history. There you go. Okay, it just didn't load yet. Right here, you see dynamic variables. The contact ID is stored in here. How did Retell know about the contact ID? Because of our workflow, okay? So that's very powerful, because if we wanted to send the contact name, the contact email, the contact address, we can send it. And then now your voice agent knows about that information. You can actually use those variables, contact ID and squiggly brackets, inside of your prompt. If you wanted to tell the agent about the lead, you can have a section here that says lead info. And then for some reason, if you wanted the contact ID to be in here, you would just double squiggly brackets and then contact ID. It is case sensitive, but as soon as the AI agent gets this information, which is while the phone is ringing, it will have this information. Very powerful. But for this situation, we don't actually need this info because we are going to get it later in the form of a webhook. Now, how do we account for failures, right? Because I'm going to pin this data again so that we don't have to call the AI agent one more time. But if I do this now and I test this workflow, it should actually fail. And you see it did fail. And why is that? It's because we already have a contact with that phone number, and our GoHighLevel is currently set to not allow duplicate contacts, which I recommend. And so how do we account for this failure? If we come into this HTTP module, and if we scroll down, and let's see, if we go to settings and on error, we are going to continue using error output. So let's see what happens. I think that's the right way to do it. So if you see, once I set that setting, it created two different branches, this switch module here, but instead it's built into the HTTP node. So now we have, if we create a contact, if it errors, it should go down this route right here. So let's see, let's test the workflow. And it did. You see this little green line here. Maybe it's difficult for you to see, but there's a green line showing that it's going down the error branch. So what I'm going to do is sort of move this up for now to get it out the way. But what does the error output actually look like? So if we come in here and look at the error output, we have all this random information, but inside of the error message right here, you actually see it returns the contact ID, but it's in this like weird gobbledygook format that we're going to need to parse out of here. Essentially, we're going to need to have N8N search this message and pull out the contact ID, okay? And we need to send that contact ID back to Retell so that it has it, because regardless of whether it was successfully able to create the contact or not, all we really care about is the contact ID. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to show you. So we're going to come over here and we're going to create a set node, just like we did before. And in here, I'm going to name this parse contact ID. It doesn't matter what you name it. I just like to be descriptive. And in here, we're going to add a field. We're going to name it contact ID the same way we named it in the other set node, because it's going to be either or, but we want to be able to refer to this variable the same way whenever we respond to the webhook. Doesn't matter if we get it because we successfully created a contact or because we failed creating a contact. We want to be able to refer to this as contact ID in the response. So if we come in here, if I just come into, and I'm using the error output here. So this was a create contact node and it responded with all this garbage. But if I just drag and drop this message in here, it's going to send all this information back to Retell, and it's not super helpful. So we need to be able to search this information to pull out the contact ID. And in order to do that, I'm going to give you a shortcut. Again, it's going to be provided in the export that I give you guys, the template that I give you guys. So you can just import this. You don't need to be a master at regular expression or parsing content. I'm just going to copy this here and I'm going to pop this open. And right after message, I'm going to actually paste what I copied. And here, what we're doing is, it's called regular expressions. We're using regular expressions to search that string of gobbledygook that we had. And we're essentially saying, hey, match contact ID and give me the value that's after it, and then store that, okay? You don't need to bug yourself with the details here. If you're very curious about what this does and how it does it, paste this inside of ChatGPT and tell it to explain to you like you're 5, and it'll do a better job than I can. But again, this is going to be provided to you in the template. So once we have that, we have the contact ID exactly how we want it. We'll just test this step, and you'll see that it returns the contact ID. Perfect. So now we have a set node, and maybe we can just connect this to respond to the webhook. And if I pop this open, the contact ID, if I pop that open, you'll see it's stored in there. So now We didn't delete the contact. This contact still exists. Here, let me refresh this just so you could see. Contact still exists. But now if I test this webhook, we should actually be able to go through the entire flow without any failure. Boom. Cool. So if I call right now, then I should be able to make that call and the contact ID should be stored in the call logs. So I'm going to go ahead and make that call just so that we can test. I like to test at every juncture, at every iteration that makes sense. And so you should too. Actually, let me end that call because we didn't unpin this data. We need to unpin this data so that we can actually listen for new data. So I'm going to come in here and make that call one more time. And this may be painful for some of you guys, but I like to explain every step of the process because some of you guys aren't going to implement the same way I do. And it looks like we are unable to connect, and I wonder why. Let's come over here and make sure we don't have any errors coming up. Let's check our phone numbers. It could be calling the wrong phone number. Let me copy this. And let's go back to contacts here and let's call. All right, call. Okay. So that kicked it off. Let me end that call. So you see here, we successfully made the call and the call all the way through, and it failed to create the contact, and it actually parsed the contact ID successfully, and then it sent it back to Retell. So let's go back into our call log and let's see if that data is actually present. So if we come into the data, we have the contact ID and you see it ends in YPQ. Let's make sure that's actually what we expected, and YPQ. So we're good to go. First step, we're 42 minutes in, it's first step. Okay. Very important. This stuff's detail rich, and so we got to make sure that we get it right. All right. So next thing we need to do is the fun stuff. We're actually going to come and book the appointment. So now we're going to talk to the agent, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make sure that we activate that tool, that function, because we need to work with that data in order to create the agent. So let's go ahead and call that number one more time, and I'm going to make sure I'm listening for the webhook. This is very important. When you're testing, you actually need to be listening. What's going to happen is as soon as we call, it's going to call this webhook and it's going to stop listening, and then we're going to start listening again for the tool, for the function call. Okay, so let's go ahead and call the number.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, I'd like to book an appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. My name is Justin Melendez.
Thank you, Justin. I'll attempt to book your appointment for tomorrow.
Okay, cool. So you notice that I started the webhook again after the initial call because we're just in testing mode. Whenever you're in production, you're not going to have to do this because it's always going to be listening. But right now we needed to. Okay, so what happened? The second time that the webhook was called, it came here and it just stopped. Why? Because it didn't meet this criteria, right? The JSON body event didn't even exist. So what we need to do is add another routing rule. And if we come over here and look at the data that we got, first and foremost, let's come over here and pin this data because we're going to be working with this data over and over again. So we're going to add another routing rule, and down here, we're going to search for something that we can query for. So if I come down here, it looks like name, appointment booking. That's the name of our function. So I'm going to route based on this. So if I drag and drop the value here, and if I say, hey, if JSON body name is there and it's equal to appointment booking, we're going to say this is the appointment booking flow. And so if we test this output, it looks like it went down the appointment booking line. And if you could tell here, let's move some of this stuff out the way so that we can have some space. If you notice here, we've got a green dot or a green line. That's kind of hard to see, but we've got a green line here. So it's going down that track. And so what do we want to do next? So now we have the information that we need. We have the contact ID that's already stored in there. And I'm going to show you where that contact ID is. It's pretty cool. So because we provided that contact ID in the initial webhook call, once we come in here, and if we search this for, I think it's dynamic let's see, dynamic Retell LLM dynamic variables, you'll see the contact ID is provided back to us. Very useful because when it calls the tool, it actually gives us the contact ID because we set it earlier. So really cool. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to come back in here and I'm going to set some variables, okay? Just so that it's easy for you guys to operate this. So let's set some variables. We're going to use the set node and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to set variables. And the variables that I'm actually going to set is like the location ID, the calendar ID, and other stuff. So let's set location ID and let's come back into our account and find that location ID and copy that. Let's go back in here and we're just going to paste our location ID. That's never going to change if you're just dealing with one sub account. And then here I'm going to set the contact ID because we have it in our webhook, but it's a ton of data in there. We want to make it simplified. So if we come down here to dynamic, and it should highlight it. There it is. So we're just going to slide that over there. And so now we have our contact ID stored. I wonder why that's reading empty. Oh, because we haven't tested it yet. And then next thing we need is the calendar ID. And let's see what calendar we're going to be dealing with here. So if I go to calendars inside of settings, we'll just use this AI calendar here. Let's go and paste that ID. I copied that from here. If that was too fast, there's an ID. There's a little copy button that you can copy and paste from. And I think that's all we need for now. So we have the location ID, the contact ID, and the calendar ID. So we're setting those variables. We're going to use those later. So that's handy. Next thing we're going to try to do is we need to format the date and time that the caller requested into a specific format. Because if we come into create appointments, which we were looking at earlier, you notice that at a minimum, we need calendar ID, location ID, and the contact ID, which we just set. We know we have all that stuff. And then we also need a start time, but that start time is in very specific format. It's called ISO 8601 format. And so we're going to use AI. This is the only time we're going to use AI in the workflow to actually format that. So we're going to take the natural language that we got in from Retell, and then we're going to format it into ISO 8601. So we're going to come in here, and then I'm going to search for OpenAI, and then message a model. If you don't have an API key already configured inside of OpenAI, you would create a new credential and then get an API key from your OpenAI account. Google it or ask ChatGPT how to do it. It's pretty simple. And then you would just create a credential and put the API key in here. Super simple. I already have one in there, so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. So all these settings remain the same. For the model, we're just going to use GPT-4o. I don't go into crazy detail about how much one cost over the other or how much is what's best. Just GPT-4o has worked for me. Over here for the prompt in the messages, I'm going to change this to system prompt for now. And then I'm going to change this to expression and then pop it out just so we have a bigger setting to work for. And then I'm just going to bigger text editing box to work with. And so I'm just going to copy and paste this prompt here. It looks long. Again, I'm going to provide this to you inside of the template, but essentially we're just saying, hey, this is the information you're going to get. You're going to get a natural language time like tomorrow at 2 p.m. and I need you to convert it into ISO 8601 time. And I am in the Eastern Standard Time Zone. Now, if you're in a different time zone or if you serve clients that are in multiple time zones, then you would just have to figure out a solution, like maybe ask for their city and state or their province, and then just have AI set the right time zone. So you can modify this, but you see here, I say Eastern time zone, okay? And so I gave it some example input. Hey, here's the current time, and we're going to provide it with the current time using a variable that exists within N8N. You'll see that here in a second. And then we're going to provide it with a natural language time that was provided by the function call. Because remember, in the function call, we had properties that we set, and one of them was the requested appointment in natural language tomorrow at 2 p.m. And so we have that information in our webhook. So I just copied and pasted that. You can do the same. Next thing we're doing, we're going to add another message, and that is the user message. And the user message is actually going to have the data that we need. And so I'm going to copy and paste an example here. I'm going to set this to expression. We're going to pop this open and then just paste this example. So what are we doing here? We have the current time that we're provided. We're providing the information in JSON format. You don't have to, but I just choose to. And if you notice, I have these double squiggly brackets, open and close, and then I have $now. That's a default variable inside of N8N that will send the date and time that's actually like the real-time date and time at the time of execution of this workflow, just so that AI has something, this AI, OpenAI node has something to relate it to, because AI is not good at telling time on its own. But if I give it the time, then it can say, hey, okay, if today is March 16th, then tomorrow at 2 is probably March 17th at 1400, right? Okay. So here, natural language time, you notice that this is red. So we're just going to go ahead and everywhere this is red, I'm just going to delete this. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to search for the webhook, the trigger that came in. There should be a function call in here with some parameters, right? So if we come in here, args, this little args section, we have name because we asked for the name in the function call, and then we have requested appointment. So tomorrow at 2 p.m. So if I just drag and drop this in between the quotes, very important, you'll see tomorrow at 2 p.m. is in there. And so if I just click test, we should get a ISO 8601 formatted start time. Now we do, okay? Now one big error here. We don't have it in JSON format. And so we have the start time and it did what it was supposed to do. But if you scroll down, you want to output this content as JSON. Just turn that on, super simple. Now when we do this, we can use this just like all of our other drag and drop variables. So here's the start time. That's tomorrow at 2 p.m. and Eastern time zone. Perfect. Daylight savings time or the opposite of that. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to rename this node to ISO 8601 formatter and test it one more time just to make sure it works. And it works. Okay, so now we have the start time in the right format, and the next thing we need to do is actually book the appointment. And so if we come over here, we're going to search for HTTP request, and we are going to book appointment, rename that. And if I come back to our documentation, it looks like we want a post request, and the endpoint, I'm just going to copy that. So post, and if I paste the endpoint, it looks like we've got a good endpoint. Sometimes these endpoints have variables in them, and so like you'll have to fill in the blank here. You'll notice when we do get slots, you need it that way. But that endpoint looks complete. Authentication, we're going to use that credential that we set earlier, so generic credential type, and then header auth, and then over here we had YouTube test 2. What was it, YouTube test 2? YouTube RetellAI test. So we're going to use that. Now, query parameters. Do we need to send any query parameters here? I don't think so, but we do need to set headers. We already have authorization taken care of in our credential, but we do need to set the version. So I'm going to copy this and let's go send headers, copy and paste version. And then I'm going to find the date inside of this documentation and I'm going to copy and paste that. All right, now body. This is where it gets interesting. So in the body, what information do we actually need to send it? So if I come in here, it looks like we need the calendar ID, the location ID, the contact ID, and the start time at a minimum. That's all I'm going to send to it, okay? So if you come over here to this body, you can actually copy and paste this. And then we're just going to remove the stuff that we don't need. So if I come in here, send body, and instead of referring to the bodies as like individual values, we're just going to say using JSON, and then we're going to change this to expression, and we're going to pop this open and paste that example that we have here. And I said I only want calendar ID, location ID, contact ID, and start time because everything else is unnecessary. So I'm just going to delete it. And then this little comma at the end, when it's the last value, you just need to remove the comma, okay? Now, we need to be able to fill in these blanks, right? Because this isn't the information for my account, and this isn't the information for my contact, and this isn't the start time for my contact. It's going to change every single time. So first thing we have is the start time. So right here, ISO 8601 formatter, that OpenAI node, return the start time. So we're just going to drag and drop the stop time in between the quotes, and it's going to fill it in there. Really useful. Next thing we're going to do is we had this set variables node here. So we have our calendar ID. We're going to drag and drop that. We have our location ID. We're going to drag and drop that. And then we have our contact ID that gets set in the beginning of the workflow. So you shouldn't have to modify this. So if you just go into your initial set mode, you're going to replace it with your stuff right in here. And then after that, everything else should be good. So now we have, it seems like a complete request, and we should be able to book an appointment for this contact for tomorrow at 2 p.m. And so if I click test this step, we'll see if we're right. And it looks like it worked, right? Because it returned an appointment ID, which typically means it works. And so if I come into my GoHighLevel and look at the calendar, appointments, we have an appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pretty sweet. If I test this again, it should actually fail, right? Because this slot is booked. And so long as our calendar doesn't allow multiple bookings per slot, then we should fail. And my calendar does not allow multiple bookings per slot. So let's test it again and see what happens. And it failed. Bad request, right? And so what I want to do here is I actually want to come down to options, and then I want to go to response and include header and status in the response, because what I want to do is be able to split what happens after this book appointment node is executed. If it's successful, I just want to respond back to Retell and say, hey, that was a successful booking. But if it's not successful, then I actually want to go get open slots. And so we're going to deal with that scenario first, the bad scenario first. So I'm going to test this step again now that we changed this. And you noticed here in here, we've got, let's see, I think I also need to continue using error output. Yeah, so let's do that. Did I do that on my example one? I just did continue. So we're going to continue. And then let's see. There it is. So we have the on error continue, and then down here in the options, we included the response headers and status. So we have this information here, and then we should have a status code. And so what I need to do is I'm going to essentially look for this bad request right here. So what I want to do is come in here and look for the if node and say if this, let's see, status is equal to, and this is a number, so we're going to say number is equal to 400, and then honestly, I think I'm just going to say if JSON error status exists, so if this number exists, then go down the false route, because we shouldn't have an error status if it was successful. And so we'll see if that's actually the case. But if we come over here, it looks like, hey, there is an error status, so it went down the true route, which means there was an error, okay? So yes, there was an error status, and we're going to go down the true route. So what happens when it goes down the true route? Now we need to go get open slots, right? We don't want our appointment booking agent to be dumb and just say, hey, that's not available, go kick rocks. We actually want to suggest some slots. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to add a node, and I'm going to look for date. And you see this date and time category, and what we're going to do is format a date. And the reason we're doing this is because if we go to calendar, let's see, get free slots, which is the endpoint we're going to use. This is the variable we were talking about here. We'll solve for this in a second. But if you notice here, there's a few things that are required. One is the calendar ID that's in the path, but then also we need a start date and an end date, and it's in this weird format. It's called epoch time in milliseconds, and you don't need to know what that means, but essentially there's some conversion that we need to do, and so we're going to do that conversion really fast. And so if we come over here to click format date, we'll add a format date node, and essentially we're going to convert the start date to epoch time. And so if I come down to, let's go to the start time that was from the OpenAI node, and I drag that in here, and I just say, hey, the format that I want is Unix MS timestamp. So that's epoch time in milliseconds. That's equivalent to, so just select that. And then the output field, we're going to call this start date. And let's test it. It should give us this long number that makes no sense to us, right? Perfect. That's what we want. If you can check this, if you just go to ChatGPT and put this in there and say, hey, what time is this actually? It'll tell you. So that's the start date. But if you come into the documentation here, we also need an end date. And so we're just going to add a day to the start date and then format an end date. But the reason we're doing this is because we're getting open slots. We want to get free slots closest to the slots that they originally requested. So if they said tomorrow at 2 p.m., they wanted to book an appointment, but tomorrow at 2 p.m. is not available, then we're going to go get open slots for the rest of today or the rest of tomorrow and the next day, right? And so we need an end date. So let's go ahead and do that math. We can do that inside of N8N. You can also use AI to do this, but you'll be reliant on the prompt. So we're not going to use AI. So we'll come over here. We'll look at date again. And then we're going to add to a date. So we're going to add a day. Let's say add one day. These names are arbitrary, but I just like to set them. And so the start date, we can just copy and paste that or drag that into the date to add. And then we're going to add one, and the unit to add is day. So we're going to add one day. And then, sure, we can leave that as new date. And then if I test it, that the output it gives it to us in is ISO 8601 format. We don't need it in ISO 8601 format. We need it in epoch time or Unix MS time. And so we just need to add one more date node. And now we are just going to format a date, and we'll call this the end date. And I'm going to drag and drop the new date in here. We could probably name that something better. And the format is going to be Unix MS timestamp. And then the output field name is going to be end date, just so that we can be descriptive and test it. And now we have a start date in this format, and now we have an end date in this format. It's exactly what we need. So now we're going to get open slots. So if we come into here, we're going to use the HTTP node once again. We'll rename this get slots. That's one too many L's. Save. And if we look here, our endpoint is actually a GET request this time, and we're just going to copy the endpoint and paste it in here. But now you notice we need to fill in the blank here in this calendar ID. So I'm going to change this to expression, and then I'm going to pop this open, and I'm going to remove this calendar ID section here because that was a placeholder, and I'm actually going to come and find our set variables output here. So set variables, we have a calendar ID. I'm just going to drag it and drop it in between these two forward slashes. And now our calendar ID is filled in there. So pretty sweet. Authentication, generic, and then header authentication, and we're using RetellAI test, and query parameters. So I think we actually need to send start date and end date as query parameters, but we also need a header. So if we come over here, headers, we need to set the version like we have for all the other ones. So I'm going to copy this, send headers, version, and then go back to our documentation, copy this date, and paste the date. Next thing we need to do is send query parameters, because if you pay attention, this doesn't say body anymore. Oh, I clicked that. It says query parameters, okay? So we need to send start date, which we have already. So start date. And if we come over here, we need that epoch time in milliseconds. We're just going to drag and drop that. And we're going to add another parameter, and that's called end date. And it's case sensitive. That's the reason I'm copying and pasting these names here. So I recommend you do the same. And then that end date that we had in that previous node, we're just going to drag and drop. You'll notice that if you don't test these nodes before you move on to the next step, the data won't be available here. So it's always a good idea to test the step. So now I think we have everything we need to get open slots. So let's go ahead and test this step. And there you go. So it returned a list of open slots, right? Now, what do we need to do to get this back to RetellAI? It's very simple. So if I come into RetellAI and go to the agent that we just created, I want to say there's some documentation that we can reference in here. They're typically pretty good about documentation. Let me search up their documentation so I can show you how you're supposed to appropriately respond. So let me find it here. So if I look at function node, calling custom function right here. So inside of custom function, this is what we did earlier, but what I want to do is define a response. Okay, so here's a response. And let's see, I'm pretty sure all it's looking for is results. It is. So it's looking for a result. So we're going to format that correctly. So if we come in here, we got the open slots, we have all this data, but we need to pass it back to Retell so that it could tell the customer on the phone, hey, that date is not available, but here are two dates that are closest to your date. So we're going to come over here and add node, and we're going to respond to Webhook, and we're going to respond with JSON. We'll change this to expression, pop this open, change my field to result, not results, plural, result, singular. And then in here, we could just put a message in clear language. That slot is no longer available, let's say is not available. Here are some open slots. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it all the open slots and then let RetellAI just find the two that's closest to them, because we told it in the prompt, if there are no open slots, suggest two slots that are closest to the requested time. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to drag and drop under 317. I'm going to drag and drop slots before the quote. And then I'm going to put a space after these curly brackets. And then I'm going to come down here to the 18th of March and drag and drop slots here. Don't worry about these dates here. They'll be filled in dynamically with whatever information that you have. But now if you look at the message, we're essentially going to tell the AI, RetellAI, that, hey, that slot wasn't available, but choose from one of these slots. And it's going to suggest the closest ones, okay? We have an appointment already in here for 2 o'clock. So let's actually call the voice AI agent again and see if this works like we expect it to work. And remember, when we call initially, our webhook's going to fire and come up this route, and then we're going to listen again and then wait for the tool call, and then it should go down this route and do all this. But I'm going to come in here and unpin the data, and we've made a lot of changes, so we should be saving more often. So I'm going to click test workflow so we're listening, and let's make that call again.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Time to book your appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Please hold on for a moment. Unfortunately, the requested time of tomorrow at 2 p.m. is not available. However, the nearest available slots are tomorrow at 2:30 p.m., tomorrow at 3 p.m. Would either of these times work for you?
Awesome. So it worked exactly like we thought it would. Okay. Now let's build out the scenario where the booking is actually successful, because what it was asking me is if I want to book appointment at 3 p.m. or 2:30 p.m. because those slots are open because we just checked it. So if I respond and say, yes, go ahead and book me for 3 p.m., it's going to call this webhook again and actually go down the success route. So how do we tell RetellAI that we were actually successful booking the appointment? It's very simple. And if I come over here and just copy this, you can literally, or duplicate it. You come over here and we're just going to attach this respond to webhook for the false section. Because remember, this is checking if there was an error. If there was an error, it's going up here in true. If there wasn't an error, then it's going to go down here to false. Very simple. Let's pop this open. Let's pop open this response. And instead of giving it all this garbage and all these open slots, what we're going to do is, I deleted a quote here. What we're going to do is just say your appointment, or let's say the appointment has been successfully booked. So now I'm just going to go ahead and save that, and we're going to make one last call. I'm actually going to go through and ask for 2 p.m. and 2 p.m. is not going to be available. So it's going to suggest some other slots, and then I'm going to take one of those slots that it suggests, and then it should come down this route. I'm going to be manually turning on the listen for messages by testing the workflow. But at the very end, I'm going to transition this to the production URL and turn it on, and we'll do a full-on call just so you could see it work in its entirety. So let's go ahead and test this workflow. Let's come back and make the call.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Attempt to book your appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Please hold on for a moment. Unfortunately, the requested time of tomorrow at 2 p.m. is not available. However, the two nearest available slots are tomorrow at 2:30 p.m., tomorrow at 3 p.m. Would either of these times work for you?
I'll take the 3 p.m.
Got it. I'll book your appointment for tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Please hold on for a moment. Your appointment has been successfully booked for tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Thank you, Justin. Let me know if you...
Okay, so it worked. However, I said 3 p.m. and it booked 2:30 p.m. That's not a huge issue. It would be in real life, but the issue that you experience here is I get a lot of feedback between my speakers and my mic, and so sometimes it just doesn't hear me well, but on the phone, it's pretty accurate. But if we come into our sub account and I go over here to appointments, you'll see we have one at 2 and we have one at 2:30, which is exactly what we expected. And so if you saw it sort of go through its whole process live, but now what we're going to do is make sure that we publish this workflow, okay, so that it works without us having to continue to click test workflow, right? So if I come in here to the webhook, I'm going to click on production URL, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to turn this on. Okay, so now it's going to be active. That means it's always going to be listening, but it's going to be listening on the production URL. So we need to change the URL for our function call, because instead of using the test URL, we're actually using the production. So I'm just going to paste my production URL and update it. Format JSON, don't lie to me. Format JSON. If you get that error, just click format JSON again. Okay, and then we also need to update the phone number one, right? So for the incoming call, so phone number, the inbound webhook here is still the test one, so we're just going to paste the production one and click out, and that we're saved. So now if I come in here, I'm actually going to delete my contact so we can give it a end-to-end test. And let's copy and paste, delete. We'll give that a second to delete this contact. Looks like it's gone. It looks like our appointments should be gone as well. They are. So let's go ahead and do one final call, and we'll take a look at the executions here so we can see what's going on. So let's give it a call.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Thank you, Justin. Let me attempt to book your appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Please hold on for a moment. Your appointment has been successfully booked for tomorrow at 2 p.m., Justin. Let me know if there's anything else I can assist you with.
Hey, can you book another appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m., please?
Let me check if I can book another appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Please hold on. Just checking in. I'll proceed to check the availability for tomorrow at 2 p.m. for you. Please hold on for a moment. It seems that the requested time of tomorrow at 2 p.m. is no longer available. However, the closest available slots are tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. and 3 p.m. Would you like me to book one of these for you? Let me know.
Yeah, I'll take the one at 3 p.m., please.
Great. Let me book your appointment for tomorrow at 3 p.m. Please hold on for a moment. Your appointment has been successfully booked for tomorrow at 3 p.m., Justin.
All right, awesome. There was a little bit of a lag in between the first and the second booking. I just threw a curveball at it and tried to book again for the same slot. There's actually a setting I'll show you here inside of Retell before I end the video that if it's got like dead time, we can just say, hey, just please continue to hold, be patient. We're trying to book your appointment. So let's come in here and see what happens. So we have our contact that was created. We deleted it earlier. We should have 2 appointments. One for 2 p.m. and one for 3 p.m. exactly as we expected. So the system is working. Now, let me show you where you can go in here and set that sort of the idle message. If you come into the functions here, if the function is taking too long to execute, you can check this box, speak during execution, and you see the information here says if the function takes over 2 seconds, the agent can say something like, let me check that for you. So you can come in here and technically say, hey, it's taking a little longer than expected, please bear with us, yada, yada. But I'm not going to set that, just so you see where you could set that. Retell makes it pretty easy to be extensible. So here we have, you saw there was a few different workflows that were triggered or a few different webhooks that were triggered, but pretty awesome. The system works. I think this is simple. I think it's predictable. I think it'll work every single time. So I'm just going to button this up for you guys, and then I will export it and provide it for you for free in the school community. You would just come in here and import from file and upload the file, and you should have the information you need to get started. All you would want to do is come in here to set variables. You have a location ID in here, and then also we had a location ID inside of create contact. And so you would probably want to come in here and make sure that you change that location ID as well. But hopefully you found this valuable. If you did, please comment, subscribe. I know this was a longer video, but I think it's much needed and I think it's comprehensive, and hopefully you could take this and implement it inside of your business. So I'll see you on the next one. Peace.